Hello. In this short clip, we would introduce SyCAS, developed by Vega system, standing for Systematic Conformity Assessment System as a web service. SyCAS entertains a number of principal functions, and its key purpose is to assist organizations to define and evaluate everything that they do in terms of process, standards, or codes of practice. SyCAS principally comprises two main sections. The first section, specs and schema, assists you to define a process or a standard, and the second section allows you to evaluate how well a product or a group of people or a team are performing in accordance with that process or standard. We quickly introduce specs and schema. On the left-hand side panel, you see a list of standards and codes of practice and governance models. You can define virtually any qualitative process here. The structure is hierarchical, so you can have a structure followed by a subsets. Here we find the functions to actually define a standard and substandards, move them around, etc. We can add comments to what we do. The system maintains a log of everything that happens to that. And the more important part of this is to actually transform a qualitative process or a standard or code of practice into a model capable of being evaluated. This is the SyCAS editor. So the editor itself is graphical, as you can see. We have many ways of looking at the model. We can have top-down model, we could have a radial model, we could have side representation model. Therefore, it's an incredibly flexible architecture. The entire model is called a schema, and a schema has got multiple hierarchy levels, that is so-called level 1. Each level has got a number of sub-levels, and generally level 1 is supplied by Vega systems or defined in collaboration with the organization as a template, such as a life cycle, such as particular product development steps, or whatever it is that the organization would use as a basis for decomposing into specifics. Here we have got a model for conformity assessment to a technical specification called LFCT. Each component, each part of the level 1 so-called life cycle model, which starts with G1 to G8, is decomposed into how do we know, what do we need to measure, and how do we know we are achieving this objective. What are the predictors of each objective here? This particular one, G3, is got 4 measurable parameters which give us a feel about how we achieve that. At the top of the hierarchy, we have an aim. Here it is conformity to LFCT specification version 1.4. The system allows us to actually add an aim to start with. The so-called level 1 is a list of goals that are defined individually. Just to show you a typical example, here is specification for one of these goals, design conformity, and we can define how to measure this, what kind of characteristics it has, and how to be evaluated. Once we define level 1, and we're hoping that level 1 would be standardized in an organization as a template, all the components that feed into level 1 goals here are called level 2 and level 3, etc. We can have as many levels as we like. Each one of these components is a measurable predictor of how well we are achieving the higher level goal. This is the editor, and if we actually go back, before we leave the editor, we can actually have a look at the reporting mechanism in the editor. This reporting mechanism allows us to take a textual report to help us understand what we have designed, what parameters we have associated with each component in the model, and how to measure these. We could also take a graphical printout, and eventually we can, once we design the process or the standard in this model-based graphical representation, our task is done. If we save what we have done under the specs and schema, now we are ready to go into the second part of SyCAS. Here we define products. The products are those are projects or products or teams are those we want to evaluate against the set of standards or processes that we have already developed here. If we have already got one product, CT65, this product we can look at, and it says CT65 is associated with two standards. One is called LFCT and the other one is called sustainability specifications. We can define a product, and we can also associate it with as many of these standards we have in our library on the left hand side as possible. There are a number of actions we can do. We can attach it to a standard, we can detach it from a standard, we can edit it, rename it, etc. Once we have defined the product, we can evaluate it against the standards it is attached to, either one at a time, here this option, or all of them together. I'd like to show you the combined option. The combined option says CT65 is associated with LFCT standard and associated with sustainability standard. These are the schemas for LFCT and sustainability. So we can go through evaluation, enter values here for each component, and continue with the evaluation. When the evaluation for this branch is finished, we go to the next standard and start putting values as has been designed by the designer. So the designer decides how to measure each component. We also have a place where we can actually add evidence, records, scans of documents, photos, audio and video files, whatever is necessary as evidence. Once the evidence is attached and the assessment of these goals are entered, then we would end up with a total evaluation of this product or this team according to measurements carried out for the standards which the team is associated. And then we can go and take a print. The textual print would give us how well the product or the team has performed against each component which has been measured. We could also go for a pictorial reporting mechanism which actually shows the entire schema. The highlighted lines are those areas where we are underperforming, and with one graphical view we can quickly work out where the areas of concern are going to be. That is the evaluation, and after the evaluation we would effectively have achieved our target for the particular product or team. We can do this all the time, manually or automatically, and I hope that this brief clip has given you a feel about how SyCAS works and how it relates to quantifying generally qualitative processes to give us much tighter control and deeper understanding of how we are performing in a product, project, team, or any aspect measured against a set of rules or standards.